Welcome to the PaynePoints Podcast. We enjoy telling the stories of everyday people, whether that be small business owners, entrepreneurs, or people with a passion for their community. We want to highlight them and give them a platform to share their story. So grab your favorite beverage and join us on today's episode where we tell the story of someone just like you. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Sarah Harbuck, and joining me today is Kristin Ellis.
Good morning.
And our producer, Megan Harbuck.
Hello.
Our special guest is Angélica Davila. Did I get that right?
You sure
I
did.
always do it wrong. She is here. She's a teacher. You might remember her from the podcast we did back in December called Ask Me About K-Pop. Her and her friend Shannon host a K-pop podcast, and we wanted to have her on and talk about her job as a teacher and the interesting person she is. So, Angélica, why don't you sort of give us a little bit of a biography about your life, you know, where you grew up and your family life and where you currently live and all those good things.
All the good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello. Good morning. Yes, I'm originally from Austin, Texas, so another Texas gal in the mix. But that's where I was born and raised. And I did my undergrad in Boston, and I actually studied journalism. But when I graduated, I had sort of like lost the passion that I had for it throughout being in school for it, and I don't know if maybe that's why, but but I sort of changed gears and just decided that I wanted to do something that put a little bit more good out into the world, which is not to say that there's no such thing as good journalism. It just wasn't what I wanted to do.
Right.
But so I decided to become a teacher. And I moved to California for a graduate program, and I got my master's in education, and then I got a job teaching. I got hired in LA. So I've just been in LA ever since. It's been like 6, almost 7 years now that I've been here.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. And I started teaching in middle school. I have my multiple subject credential in California, which means I can teach like elementary and middle school. So I started out as a middle school English and history teacher, and then I have mostly taught 5th grade. But now I actually work for the county. I'm not in the classroom full time. I'm actually working for the county, and I work for a program that helps teachers get their teaching credentials. So I am their like practicum supervisor, which basically means that I like observe them in the classroom and I give them tips for like practical things of how to act, as opposed to the theory, which they learn in like a lecture class. I'm there with them actually in the classroone. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's
excellent.
that's what I'm doing.
The real education, the hands-on,
Yes.
on the job learning. Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I know teaching has got to be a difficult profession in the best of times. And this last 15, 16 months has been a roller coaster.
Your face.
For the education industry. I know this is only an hour podcast, but what about all of that has been the most impactful to you and how you do your job? I mean, there's the obvious things like, doing Zoom classes and things like that. But like, what has been one of the things that you thought was great about this experience, and also one of the things that's been kind of like, ugh, I don't ever want to do this again?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I really, really counted my lucky stars that I was not full-time in the classroom when everything shut down, because this past year, I mean, honestly, the biggest challenge has been that so many things have just been really up in the air, that it's really difficult for schools and for teachers to then adequately plan for like how to adjust the curriculum or how to, now deliver all of these things online. And, schools didn't train teachers in the technology, and there's no, additional support for trying to like, oh, I'm having technical issues, but I'm home alone, so I'm the only one who can deal with that.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of challenges, and I'm like very grateful that I wasn't in the classroom this year, and have decided to sort of wait until things like calm down a little before I jump back in full time. But I think one of the things I've really enjoyed about the online learning is that I really love watching the way that the students are so adaptable. Like, even I work with teachers who teach middle school and also even all the way down to first grade. And like, there is nothing like watching a little first grader be like, Jeremy, you're on mute. It's so cute. I like, can't take it. They just like they're
like little
really,
adults.
Really quickly.
You know?
Exactly.
They're like little adults in a meeting. It's so cute.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny. So I love watching how adaptable they are because it's just such a like beautiful quality of children, I think. But it is incredibly difficult to actually give meaningful instruction online. It's so easy to tune out. Like, you have such little control over the situation that they're in.
Yeah.
And I feel like the most difficult part for a lot of students too is that, their home life is not necessarily a safe and easy place to go to school, whether that's because it's not a good home environment or because they have a lot of family members or they have other siblings who are also at school. There's just so many circumstances that made it really challenging. And I think for both the teachers and the students, we've just been missing being at school. Like, even California started to do hybrid learning in April. So students who wanted to come back could go back to the classroom, and then families who wanted to continue virtually could just stay online. And all the kids who are still staying at home, like, they're so jealous of the kids who got to go back to school because they just missed being at school. And so, which is like endearing because, you always hear like, I hate school. And the kids really do like it, but it's a challenge. It's so many challenges this year.
I've heard that a lot of kids have had a hard time with the not having that social aspect that, a public school environment will provide. And it sounds like, that's been a really hard thing for a lot of kids. Like, the introverts are probably getting along okay. But everybody else is probably like, I need to see my friends. I mean, I don't think we've really taken into account just how hard this has been on the kids. Just in general, like it's hard on the adults because of the money situation or what have you. But then you think about kids and their entire routine was just completely upended, and you said it perfectly. They're adaptable. Kids will be, they'll adjust, but at the same time, I think it's been mentally and emotionally difficult for them on that level. And so, it would be great if everybody, got vaccinated and take the precautions so that way life can kind of go back to some semblance of normal. For everybody's sake, and I can imagine that your job will be a little easier if, you get to do it in the classroom.
My older sister is also in education, and she's been talking a lot about how they've basically thrown out all the standardized testing that they did this year because, but the teachers are still so concerned because the test scores were below normal or below what they know that their students are capable of. But, and I was like, this was not a normal year in any sense of the word. You talked about, home life and challenges and distractions when you're learning from home. And I mean, not to mention just I don't know, how does a first grader go through this like existential crisis that the rest of us have been going through? And how do you handle that? I mean, of course those test scores were lower this year. It's the whole world has been lower off this year.
My test scores are lower too. I
think we're all kind of
Well, I kind of want to know what's the funniest thing you have seen happen on a Zoom like just if you don't have to give. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but if you can share, I want to know some funny stuff that some little kid has done or said.
I was just watching a Zoom the other day, and this sweet little kid, he was like so excited to participate. And he did. He answered the question, and then he asked if he could go to the bathroom. And the teacher was like, yeah, of course, no problem. And he walks away, and he was just wearing a T-shirt and his little like whitey tighties because he was in bed. So he just like walked away, and nobody had said anything or noticed. But I saw it, and I was just like, oh no. But he was, first grader, so it's okay.
I mean,
less embarrassing than if it had been an 8th grader.
But 6-year-olds, they don't care really.
Exactly. I think, let's see, what else is fun? I don't know. I feel like just them learning all of the little Zoom norms is so interesting.
But
that's also something like you guys were talking about, the socialization aspect of it. It's like, in a regular classroom, if we were doing a lesson, I could just have the students turn to their partner and talk, or like do a quick group brainstorm. There's so many opportunities for them to chat with each other. But then here on a Zoom, like you can't just have them turn to a neighbor and talk. It's so difficult to have them talk to each other and to actually give them the opportunity to like socialize in an academic way.
Right.
And so I tried encouraging some of my teachers to, embrace the chaos and like just give them 2 minutes of everybody's unmuted and it's just a casual talk, or like even play a game, and like if people talk over each other, like it's okay. It'd only be for 2 minutes, and it's okay if things don't go perfectly. The teachers love having everything planned to the T, so it's hard to get them to let go. But the kids do really well with it, and it's always really cute to see them like, oh, wait, I'll speak next, or whatever.
Yeah.
And fifth graders, they're what, about 10 years old typically?
Yeah, 10, 11.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting age. Mm-hmm. Being a teacher, you're kind of a profession where you have to wear a lot of hats. Not only are you teaching these kids, but you're also kind of like a parent part-time, and you're a social worker, and,
a counselor, a nurse.
It's a whole list of things, and they really don't pay you guys enough.
No.
What is something that you do for yourself? Because I imagine that, in a normal type of teaching situation where you're in the classroom and you're talking, with your students and the day-to-day, and we'll pretend like this last year and a half hasn't happened. I can imagine that there are certain things that come up with certain students that, it's just heartbreaking, or, it's, there's not really a lot you can do, and you want to help, but what do you do for yourself to kind of keep you in a positive frame of mind and be the best teacher for your students? Because that can be really mentally like bog you down. So what kind of things do you do to set yourself up to kind of stay positive and a force for good?
That's a really good question. We talked about that a lot in my grad program. I had a lecturer who talked about how like you kind of have to go to school with this like Velcro vest on, and like you have to be able to take it off when you go home, because there is so much that you, like you said, like that's out of your control. You can't actually save every child, and that has been even more, I think that point has been a lot louder this year when we like actually get to see into students' homes, and there's a lot of things that like we get this like perspective that maybe we don't usually get at home, and there's even less that we can do right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think part of it has, I definitely save like every letter any student has ever written me, any artwork, whatever. I have a whole filing cabinet like filled with student letters and artwork. That really means a lot to me in order to remember, like when I am having a really bad day, like, cause you honestly see some heartbreaking things as an educator.
Oh yeah.
And so that means a lot to me to like keep that and to actually think about, the positive impact. Like, okay, look, I did do a good job. Like these kids, like I did help them. But I think a big thing for me is like talking to and sort of commiserating with other educators is really helpful. It's a hard weight to put down. And I know that burns a lot of educators out as well. Just this, you feel very helpless in a lot of, there's just so many things within the public school system that limits you. So definitely like chatting with other educators and kind of getting their perspective is always really helpful. And even just sort of talking about it and like letting it out, like as opposed to sitting at home and like stewing on it. Even if I just like called up, my sister or something, was like, you don't know anything about this kid, but I'm going to tell you what happened. And sometimes it can just help to like, okay, I said it out loud and now my brain won't think about it so much anymore. But yeah, it's a big challenge. I certainly underestimated how challenging it would be to be a teacher when I decided to do it.
Yeah, honestly, teaching is a calling more than a profession. I mean, you really work. You get paid for like 20 hours a week, and you work like 80. Not to mention all the emotional strain and everything else that You guys are awesome.
Bureaucratic hoop jumping.
Yeah.
Oh my
ridiculous
gosh.
nonsense. Yeah. I feel like they tie y'all's hands behind your back and they ask you to do the work of 8 people and with no hands. Like, here, do all
Yeah, and then
this.
they ask you why your students are not testing well, and it's like, well, you chopped off all of my arms and legs, so
Yeah.
we're kind of hopping along.
Making the best of a bad situation.
Doing what we can.
We're
here.
just sort of rolling right now.
Right. Just rolling down the hill. If only it were that easy.
Seriously.
Well, on that note, is there anyone that you, like a mentor you had or somebody who's inspired you along the way that's kind of gone, you know what, this is, why I'm going to continue to do this?
Oh, yeah. I was very lucky, and I had an excellent master teacher when I was student teaching. She was fantastic. And she was also very, frank about the challenges of the profession. So I felt like she was such a good resource that I could go to, without any judgment. Because I think it can be, when you're a teacher, you can feel a little guilty sometimes if, oh, you're I made a mistake, or I spoke too harshly for a student, or God, this kid's getting on my nerves, or I just don't know what to do with this class, whatever it is. And so it goes a long way when you have a colleague or a coworker that you can really trust to just sort of I don't know what to do, and then just sort of safely brainstorm.
Yeah.
But I also had a professor in grad school. He was a high school history teacher. He was one of those teachers from a movie, you know what I mean? The teachers who gets all the kids to stand on the desks and stuff. He was amazing. And he had this incredible way of making history really come to life for the students. He would do lessons that he called experientials. So instead of having the kids just learn or read about something, he would create an activity where they actually had to act it out. And so certain students would have your role is this and your role is this, and he wouldn't necessarily give them the historical context first. He would just outline the rules of the game, and then they sort of had this discussion, and it would tie to all kinds of things. And so I was able to use that when I was a history teacher myself, and I always loved it because it's one of my favorite subjects to teach. But he also said a piece of advice, which I tell all of my own teachers, which is never take your sick days when you're actually sick, but do take them. Because a lot of teachers will just not take their personal days. And I know you get that money back, teachers, but your mental health is important, and it is important to take at least 2 mental health days a year.
Yeah.
So that was a really big piece of advice that I still remember.
I had a teacher, like what you were just describing, in 4th and 5th grade. I had him for 4th grade, and then they moved him up to 5th grade the year I was going into 5th grade. And his name was Mr. Kniff, and he taught at Fredonia Elementary School in Natchitoches, Texas. And I loved him. He was one of those really engaging teachers who made you excited to go to school and excited to do the lessons, and everything was a game. So you didn't really feel like you were being forced into learning something. And I just remember I was so sad because I got to have him 2 years in a row, and then I went to 6th grade and I had all these other teachers because I was in intermediate school at that point.
Yeah.
And I've only had maybe 1 or 2 other teachers in my life who've been like that, where I've had great teachers, but there were those ones that were just a cut above, where they were it was like they were born to do this. And it's I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to have a couple like that, because it definitely made me more interested in school, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Not that I needed help with that because I was a big nerd, but I had a question and it just totally ran out of my head.
Well, I can go. I can ask a question.
Go ahead.
Great.
Oh my goodness.
So, Angelica, in the past, year and even previous to that, what are some hobbies that you do on a daily or weekly basis that help you unwind from the stressful job that you have?
Ooh, great question. Especially in this past year, I have lots of hobbies.
Great.
I feel like people asked me in the pandemic, what'd you do? And I was like, I started collecting hobbies is what I did. Let's see, what have I done? I mean, I've always done a lot of yoga and dance and stretching. So that's been a big part, getting home and just putting on some music, putting on my headphones and just stretching for 30 minutes or an hour is a great way to just turn my brain off. Mm-hmm. But in this past year, since I had so much time on my hands, I started learning the keyboard. which is very challenging, and I'm not good at it. I've never played an instrument before, so I'm just my brain and my hands are like not connected. I started learning Mandarin just for fun.
Oh, wow.
I am in a lot of book clubs with friends from high school, so I read a lot. I feel like reading is probably one of my bigger escapes because I read a lot of fantasy, and my book clubs are like fantasy science fiction book clubs. So we read like the less realistic, the better. And so that's a way to just like, I mean, I can hop into another world and then I forget completely about what's going on until 3 hours later. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm hungry. And then I come back to reality.
Nice.
Yes,
Yeah.
reading has always been a great escape whenever you need to just for a minute, or a couple hours, just forget.
Except that I can get sucked in and then, like you said, just disappear for 6 hours and then go, oh, yeah, maybe should have eaten something.
Yeah, like, why does my neck hurt?
Yeah.
Oh, I've been sitting in this position for 4 hours. I guess I should get up.
Yeah. So escapism. I think that was all of our goals this last year. Escapism.
Yeah.
into whatever.
Yeah.
Well, we've come to a portion of the podcast that we have now where we have this rapid fire question section, and I'm going to turn it over to Kristin, and she will ask you some fun questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what did you have for breakfast this morning?
I had a banana.
Yeah.
That's all I've had so far.
To the point. I love it.
How do you take your coffee, or do you drink coffee? Or
I do drink coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now. I take it with just a little bit of cream.
Nice. What is your current favorite song? I say current favorite because I know it changes.
It does change, but I would say my current favorite is probably Kiss Me More by Doja Cat. It's just always in my head.
Yeah, same. I totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
I can't get over it. It's just like constantly playing in a loop.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that it's all over TikTok and all that good stuff.
Yeah, it's true. It's everywhere.
Makes it worse. Do you have a TV show or anything like that you're currently watching? And if so, what?
Ooh, yes. I am watching. So one of the things I got really into over quarantine was this genre of Chinese fantasy, which is about like martial artists, but magical martial artists.
Yeah.
So like historical yeah.
Everything's more fun with a little magic.
Exactly. So I'm watching this like cartoon. It's like a cartoon version of a book that I read, which is called The Grandmaster of Demonic Cultivation.
Wow.
And I just finished one called Word of Honor. And a friend of mine and I are also watching The Circle.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Love
I'll
it.
have to check some of those out. Do you have a favorite book?
Ooh. I think one of my go-to favorites is 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. It's a book that I've read over and over again. But one of my favorite books, because I love the premise of it, is called If on a Winter's Night, a Traveler. It's by an Italian author named Italo Calvino, and it's basically a love letter to readers and the experience of reading. It's like this crazy meta book where you are the main character, and you have just purchased the new book by Italo Calvino, and so you go home to read it and then the next chapter is supposedly the first chapter of the book, and you realize that there's a misprint in the book, so the first chapter just repeats over and over. And the way the book is written, you as the reader read the chapter, right? So you go back to the bookstore to try and exchange it, and then you get like a different book. Basically, you are trying to find this book, and in the process of it, you end up reading the beginning of like 5 different books.
Wow.
So the book goes back and forth between like the books you're reading and the search that it takes you to find the book.
Wow.
So it's really interesting. It's about like the experience of being a reader.
Very cool.
And it also gives you, like, you end up reading, like, 10 different books in it because every other chapter is what you think, aha, I finally found it. And so you read the first chapter and you're like, this isn't it. So it's a really, really wild book.
That's really
Nice.
cool. That's very neat. Favorite flavor of ice cream?
Ooh, strawberry cheesecake.
Ooh.
That's a good choice.
That's my husband's favorite flavor as well. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Okay. Sweet or salty?
Ooh, salty.
Beach or mountains?
Well, I live in California, so I can have both.
I was about to say, you can, like, depending on which way
Mountains
you go.
on the beach.
Yeah, no kidding.
Zodiac sign.
I am a Cancer.
Okay.
Birthday's coming up.
It sure is.
Spring, summer, winter, or fall?
Spring.
Not that it matters much in LA.
True.
You know,
it doesn't matter at all.
It's the same temperature all year.
All year long.
Yeah. I do miss the seasons. That is true.
Not that, I don't know. I think in Texas it's mostly summer. It's like 9 months of summer.
And
then,
one
like,
month of brutal winter
Yeah,
where it
yeah.
shuts
Yeah.
everything down.
Yeah, 9 months of summer, like 2 weeks of spring, a month of winter.
3 months
and, like,
of rain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
That's
been
a
raining
season.
nonstop here. Just FYI.
Yeah. All right. Introvert or extrovert?
I do consider myself to be an introvert because I get very drained when I like spend a lot of time with people, but I
Yeah.
do like to talk to people. So I'm a chatty introvert.
There you go. Favorite color?
Green and pink.
Oh, that's a good combo, actually.
Thank you.
Lots of green and pink flowers right now, actually. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, I want to say no because you eat it sideways.
Okay.
That is the best answer I think we've gotten so far. I don't think anybody's answered like that so far.
That is true.
It is. That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah. Favorite social media platform?
Tumblr.
Tumblr.
It's the easiest one. There's no drama on Tumblr. Nobody knows who you really are. It's just like I'm just collecting these pretty photos, and that's it.
Yep.
Nice.
I feel that.
Yeah. That's a throwback answer right there.
I
I know.
Nobody. I thought I was like still one of the last people on Tumblr, but yeah.
I
Oh
remember
gosh.
when I like used to promote my Tumblr publicly, and now I've gone through like 6 different URLs. I do not want people to find me. My Tumblr is for me and me alone. That is it.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I don't have my name. I don't post any photos of myself. It is like not connected to me at all. And it's just where I collect all my nerdy ass fandoms. I just keep them in one place.
There you go.
Yes. It's coughing season here as well, as well as rainy season. I feel like it's all the things right
At least
now.
at least the rain is kind of keeping the pollen in check a little bit.
That's
this year.
true. And we all are vaccinated now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And now we don't have to do that game of is it COVID or is it allergies?
Allergies.
That was
Probably
fun.
not COVID.
Probably not.
Probably allergies.
Yeah.
but
Right.
yes.
Yeah. Well, let's get back into you and teaching. You teach 5th graders, and you said you're qualified to teach English and history. What is your favorite of the 2 subjects?
Of the 2 subjects, my favorite is definitely history. I do not like to teach writing. It is a very difficult subject to teach, and I hate grading essays. So I really don't like teaching English, to be honest. But I feel like I got pigeonholed into being the English and history teacher. My favorite subject to teach is science.
Oh,
Awesome.
My sister started out as a science teacher and sixth grade science
yeah?
teacher. Yeah, she did.
Nice.
are you qualified to teach science in California, or are you just certified
not
for the other 2?
for high school, but for elementary and middle school, yes. I can teach like any of the subjects for that.
Okay.
But science is just so fun because you can really make it like come to life for the kids. I think it's so fun to do hands-on things, and I know a lot of teachers are afraid to do science experiments and things, but those are the days the kids will remember forever.
Yeah.
I loved chemistry because of that. Every class was an experiment of some kind because you got to figure out what elements you were using in that particular chemistry makeup. So I loved chemistry for that reason, but I could do without physics because it was nothing but math.
That's true. Physics is tough. I mean, physics is fun when you're like in a 5th grade level. Physics
Sure.
Yeah.
But I was taking
Once you get into high school, no.
physics AP in high school my senior year, and it was like literally like another calculus class, and I was like I can't this is too much.
No, I can't do that either. But when I was teaching 5th grade, I used to do one of my favorite things to do every year toward the end. We would do like little science experiments throughout the year, and then our big one was we would make bottle rockets at the end of the year.
Wow.
And that was always the best.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that
funny.
they were all like super excited about that. Like, ooh, I made something explode.
Yeah. We had
Yeah, and
a-
it became the like, well, if you're in Miss Davila's class, you get to do bottle rockets at the end of the year. And it was like, yes.
Yeah.
You're probably definitely the coolest teacher for all
Well,
the kids.
thank you. I try.
What period of history is your favorite to teach the kids?
Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, that's a great question. I mostly taught, because 5th grade and also 8th grade is American history, so I've mostly taught U.S. history. I actually love teaching about, I like teaching about the American Revolution, but I love teaching about the Civil War because I do a unit where I tie it to the Civil Rights Movement. We do like a really great, like sort of, we look really deeply at like the ripples and how like, okay, this happened so long ago, but like, why does it still matter? And we kind of look at like, the Civil War, the Civil Rights Movement, and then like what's still going on today. So I always really loved teaching that. And I had a couple of different like experiential lessons where I would have the students, you know, experience like the Jim Crow laws or like the voter registration laws or things like that.
Yeah.
And so that I always think that's really interesting, and you get a lot of really incredible discussions out of the kids. Obviously teaching 8th grade was like the best for discussions because they're like a little bit older and they are able to think about more like serious topics in that sense. But even with the 5th graders, we would do little like Socratic seminars. We would do like a class like a debate or something. And it was always, I mean, I love watching kids do discussions and debates and things. They get so into it, and those are always my favorite moments in teaching, like seeing the kid get really passionate about whatever it is that they're talking about.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because it's kind of been a current event thing happening right now in real time, a lot of states are passing laws restricting what teachers can teach their students. And I'm curious, from a teacher's perspective, how does that make you feel in being able to actually adequately educate your students if there's restrictions on teaching the real history and not some, you know, watered down version of what it was?
Yeah. That's a
Looking
really
at
great
you,
question.
Texas.
Yeah, I was like, gosh, I wonder what spurred this question.
We're always in the news about something.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I mean, I think that one of the biggest challenges about the public education school system here in the U.S. is that it's not standardized. All 50 states are able to choose for their own state. It is a state-by-state basis what you decide to do. And although there are the Common Core standards, that's what we use in California, which is basically a set of standards that most states have adopted, but not all of them have. So that's obviously a huge challenge, because then you're getting, you know, kids in California who are expected to learn X, Y, and Z, and kids in Texas are expected to learn A, B, and C. And like, how are these students supposed to be equally prepared or whatever? But that's a different, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
It is tough. I would say that the one silver lining, which is not really a silver lining, that I've seen is that history is not on the standardized tests. So most schools and districts actually don't invest in history curriculums, and they don't check up on the teachers for how you're teaching history. So I have always had free reign over my own history curriculum, which, for better or worse, that usually means I have to write it myself. But I get the freedom to then write and design whatever lessons I want to. But I think, I mean, for me, like, okay, that's nice because I enjoy doing that. It's a lot of extra work, but if you think about it practically, like, who's holding me accountable? Who's checking on the kind of history that I'm teaching? Like, I could be teaching them anything. I could be teaching them that the earth is flat, and no one would be checking up on me to know, because they're not tested on that. So it's really, for me,
you might
as
get
a
an
teacher,
angry
it's very
parent
frustrating.
calling you.
Exactly.
I think
I might get an angry parent, but no one from the school is coming to check. So.
I see. Yeah, unless the parent makes enough of a fuss, right?
Exactly. Oh yeah, and they can. But it is frustrating, I think, as teachers to have these very specific expectations for what you are supposed to teach. But the reality is, oftentimes the expectations are unrealistic for, you know, how much you're supposed to cover in the time that you're actually supposed to cover it, or the depth that you're supposed to cover it, or the expectation that you should be teaching all these different kinds of sciences, but you don't have enough time in the day because you also have to worry about the phonics and the writing and the spelling and all of these other things that are actually going to be tested. And so what you end up seeing is a lot of elementary school teachers who don't even teach science or history really anymore because they only focus on the math and English because that's the only thing that's being tested. So it's a big problem.
I think that brings up an interesting point that I was going to ask, because I know I have several teacher friends and they are all disgusted with the standardized testing. And it really does make you teach for a test to get the kids to pass a test rather than a comprehensive, you know, look at all subjects and all things. And I'm wondering if, you know, focusing solely on standardized testing so they can do their, you know, the money side of teaching, you know, who gets what allotment here and there, which that's a whole other discussion. But like, do you notice, because you mentioned the different states have different standards in terms of what they teach. And, you know, looking at the current climate just of our society, do you feel like maybe the education system has played some role in the discrepancy and the kind of divide that we're seeing, because some people are taught one thing and others are taught something else to fit whatever agenda is happening in that particular area of the country? Is that part of the problem as well? Or is it, I mean, I know it's a very loaded question, but I'm curious from a teacher's perspective how that plays into a society and what people learn and how they grow up and how they carry those ideals on into their adulthood.
Oh, yeah. I think that absolutely plays a part into it, because I think ultimately education should be the priority of any government, I think. Like, if you truly want your country to succeed in any way, you need to make sure that your citizens are educated. You need to give them all the resources that they need in order to succeed and in order to survive. Like, not just survive, but actually thrive, right? Yes. And our country does not care about education. It does not put the emphasis on that at all. And it doesn't give the public school systems any kind of money. It doesn't give them, you know, the resources. It's not equitable across the states. And then they wonder, why aren't we doing as well as other countries? And it's like, well, gee, I wonder where that traces back from. Like, why doesn't this kid know, you know, basic spelling? Probably because his school is working out of textbooks that are 20 years old, or whatever the case may be. But I definitely think that has to do with it, especially as somebody who was raised in Texas and then became a teacher in California. I can see like what I was and wasn't taught. Like, for example, I had never learned about the origins of Juneteenth, like the June 19th holiday, until this past summer. And that holiday originated in Texas. And like, growing up in Texas, you have to take Texas history multiple times. Like, I took a whole year of Texas history in 7th grade, and not one time did we learn about Juneteenth, but we learned about the Alamo 5 different times. Like, what is that? So yeah, it's really crazy to see the discrepancy, and I definitely think that plays a huge role in the divides and the challenges that we see the adults of this country dealing with, because, you know, what did those adults learn, right? Like, what was their educational background? And then you see, oh, hey, that educational foundation is hella cracked. And we wonder, like, why there are so many problems when they grow up, right? I think that we as a country tend to forget that children become adults. And that it's worth investing in them.
I think it fixes so many problems too when you have a really good foundation for education and a comprehensive education where it's not just, you know, math and English, because that's what they're going to get tested on. You have a better and more productive society. You know, people are better educated, so therefore they have better opportunities, and then they have better opportunities. That means that there's going to be less poverty, and then if there's less poverty, there's going to be more successful, happy people running around. And we are one of the most depressed first world countries in existence, and we shouldn't have that here, except that, you know, I think it all does stem towards the education system. And it is no way, I want to say, the fault of the teachers. They are definitely hamstrung in this system, trying to make the best. It's kind of like in the medical profession. You know, it's such a broken system, and the doctors and the nurses are doing the best they can. in a very broken world.
Yeah.
I think the easy target is the teachers. Oh, they're not doing their job. They should do that. I see a lot of that blame from parents or people, taxpayers, they like to make that note. And I think that's not who you should be upset with. It's the lawmakers making the laws that make them feed this system that's broken and not serving our community and not serving our public. And then you end up in a state that we're in now where it's just all, we're more divided, I think, than we've been in a long time. And you've got all these different, educational points that are not equal. And I think it's spoken a lot to the way we are right now. And it's such a sad system that, we don't care.
Well, and you talk about, you mentioned that it's not equal. I mean, there's some kids are not going to be writing and math is not going to be their strong suits. They're going to be better in science. They're going to be better in arts. They're going to be better. And that's what they're going to grow up to do because that's where their strong suit is. But they're going to go to school doing terrible in these tests, thinking that they're stupid, because this is what's supposed to be important. This is what I'm tested on.
Yeah.
When in fact they're brilliant. They're just not being encouraged and they're not learning everybody's different. That you have to, from watching, Teacher Friends and, my sister being a teacher and now she teaches teachers, kind of like you do, and watching all of that and every kid is different. And now I have kids of my own. They're, one's not quite a year and one's getting close to 4. And I could already see the differences in their personalities and how they learn and how they're, so we're not, I know you can't necessarily, it has to be, a little bit standardized so that you have some of that structure. But at the same time, we have to give our teachers the freedom that, our teachers who actually know these kids and know how they learn, the freedom to give these children what they need, and the resources. Yeah. Resources are also very important. So I think,
I think that makes me think of, as far as the curriculum goes, like one of the big problems that we're seeing so much in all of these like political divides is that you've seen a real rise in people who are not thinking critically and they're not fact checking and they're just like ignoring logic, right? Like just otherwise people that you thought were completely rational just suddenly falling for these irrational conspiracy theories or these things that are just so easily proven wrong or whatever the case may be. And I think that right now, because of the standardized tests and the way that our system is set up, we focus a lot on specific information. It's like education means that you learned this fact or you learned this equation or whatever. But what it should be instead is a set of skills, right? Like we are teaching students how to be humans, right? We're teaching them how to communicate and how to think critically and how to problem solve. And it doesn't matter the content that they're using in order to problem solve necessarily,
right.
But like the ultimate skill they're going to take with them, I think is much more valuable.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true always for like history or something. Sure, that content matters.
Right.
But for skills and things like that, like when I think that we just focus so much on these like minutia, like the little details, which is like, no, they're not going to need to know about the Stamp Act when they're 25 or whatever. Or like, actually, I've never had to use the quadratic equation in my life.
No,
so like, I remember it, but I don't need to use it. Yeah. So, but the skills of problem solving or the perseverance that I gained from doing that 20-step problem or whatever, like those are things I'll take with me. But I think those are the things that should be emphasized in the classroom and that are not. Like the focus is just always so much on the little details of things that are ultimate, because then you get the kids being like, why do I need to know this? And sometimes I'm like, honestly, you don't.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm curious, as from your perspective as a teacher, what can we as the lay people, just the regular citizens of this country, what can we do to help teachers and to, from your perspective, because this is a very loaded question, I understand, but what can we do in our own states and in our society as a whole to help educators be able to assist our children in raising the next generation?
That's a great question. I think a huge part of it, if you are like a parent or something at the school, you can definitely do a lot to like actually support the teacher. You know, you can volunteer in the classroom, you can offer to help certain things. I know that a lot of teachers do like a classroom parent or something. There are a lot of ways that you can like actually put hands-on help at the school. But as far as for a larger impact, or maybe for somebody who cares about education but doesn't have children in school either, I would say keeping up with the education legislation that is happening in your state, and also supporting the teachers union. So if there is a strike or something, like support the strike, or like march with them, or petition your lawmaker to bend to the union's demands, or to change certain legislation if a big piece of education legislation is coming up. I would definitely say when you're voting, always look to see what their stance is on education. I think that is probably the best. That would be like the most effective, right? Because the only way we'll be able to really make lasting change is if we get politicians and legislators who put education first. And so looking and voting for politicians who prioritize education and who have stances on education that you align with is a really great way to support teachers and schools in the long run.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
I have, if you could wave a magic wand and the world could be the way you want it in terms of, the education system, and had like what's one of the first things you would change to make these differences, start happening?
Ooh, the first thing I would do is slash the military budget and give it all to education.
Same here.
There you go.
We need to flip that pie chart.
Yeah, I mean, even if we just took 10% of the military complex and put it into education, I mean, it would be a miracle.
Yeah,
it would just do so many
things. It would make all the difference.
When the generals are going, guys, we don't have anything to do with it. But you're still giving it to them.
Yeah.
You're still, okay, we'll just keep it for later, right?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Like a little dragon on your board.
Right.
Just sit on top of it.
Would you do anything like change the structure of the way the current like day goes, or anything like that? I mean, because obviously more money is always needed.
Yeah. Honestly, I think that we could drastically change the school schedule. I think we could easily do a 4-day week. And I also think that it would be worth starting later. Studies have shown that adolescents, especially teenagers, do not function before 10 a.m. And so starting at 8 or 7 is setting them up for failure for those first 3 hours. And then they have another 4 hours or so where they're already burnt out and they're done now because they've been awake for so long and their cognitive functions never fully came online. So I think it would be worth adjusting the schedule, because I know that the schedule right now, the reason it is the way it is to support the 40-hour work week.
I was just about to point that out. That's an ingrained sort of programming for something else. Make little worker bees.
Exactly. And so it's like, well, if the mom has to be at work at 9, then the kid needs to be at school by 8 so that she can get right, et cetera. But so that I think would definitely be worth changing. I think it's not to say that like we, are not in school for enough time, or like that we're in school for too long or something, because the school year is really not that long. But I just think that the way things get like crammed in is not, it doesn't match up with the actual science of the way that our brains work. And I think that if we really want education to be effective, you have to actually, like you were saying earlier, like think about the way that the kids learn. And so much of our education system is built around this like capitalist work week, and that doesn't have anything to do with nurturing children. So there's just like such a huge disconnect in the way that the learning is even provided. So I would definitely want to, I think, bringing in like child development practices into the actual like lawmaking, or like having those experts like talk about the way that the brain functions and develops and grows, and factoring that in to how we develop our education system would be a game changer.
Yeah. Do you think that there's some merit in maybe completely, like, you know, obviously having like an elementary school age core system where everybody learns how to read and write and, you know, math and all the things and basic history, you know, but like after they get to a certain point, like junior high school level, like magnet schools that really focus on one particular area of study that really caters to the child's strengths and interest.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen where that's really successful in like other countries, and I'm wondering,
been successful
even here in the U.S.
Well, Mom also homeschooled us, and that's what my two siblings and I have done. Is we were allowed to focus on the interests that we had growing up, not so much the things that were core.
And that made them want
things.
to do school because it was
Yes.
something that they wanted to learn. And I'm just curious if in your experience that would also be some like another thing to kind of move towards is not everybody needs to learn calculus and physics and you know so if they went to a magnet school where they focused more on art and music and things like that, or they had the one where there's more engineering, math and science geared, would that overhaul things too, so that kids were like, hey, this is really cool, I want to do this, you know, and focus on that.
I do think that there's a lot of merit to that option for sure. I went to a magnet school for high school. It was like a science academy. And we did so much, like such cool classes, and I loved it. I didn't want to go to that school. I wanted to go to the performing arts magnet. My mom said no. So I went to the science magnet instead. And I was like, I don't like science, but I did. I loved it. But I would say that my like hesitancy in fully endorsing that kind of plan would be for the kids who don't know what they want.
Sure.
Or for the aspect of like, you know, I think I really like math, but I also would love to try this painting class. And then like, you know, they went to a math academy and now that's not there. I think there's so much to gain from interdisciplinary learning. Like, you know, if you are really into math, look at how you can you can make this incredible painting with math. Yeah. Right. And so like we can do this art project and it's all based on equations or whatever the case may be. I used to do that in 8th grade when I taught 8th grade math. I'd be like, oh, we have to learn systems of equations. We're going to make a stained glass.
That's cool.
But, so I think there's a lot to learn from or to gain from that, especially because when the kids get to college, they also, again, have to really quickly choose that area of study. And I think what ends up happening and why so many people don't actually work in the degree that they have is that they make this choice without really having explored all of the different options. So I think that it would be really cool if we had like almost like an interdisciplinary magnet program of some kind, or maybe like the first couple, like maybe we even split it where like middle school is 3 years, you know, or maybe even like 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and you get to sort of explore all different things, and then maybe for 10, 11, and 12 you could focus. I also think there's a lot to be said for programs that offer, or high schools that offer vocational programs, where the students can graduate with some kind of certificate, and because college is not for everyone. Like not everybody wants to go to college or be an academic.
I dropped out.
And that's valid. Like, it's not for everybody, and it doesn't determine our self-worth, and yet we really put a lot of it on that. And I think that like my high school had a program where students could do for like junior and senior year, they could do, it was called like the Fire Academy, and they basically graduated with an EMT firefighter certification. So like they wouldn't have to go to college, and like for those kids who need to be a breadwinner or like an earner for their families right away, that's a game changer. And so because that would be like an education that's free, and now they can go right into the workforce. So I don't know. I think there's so many different types of programs that would be really beneficial. The
hard
one
to
we
pick
have
one.
now isn't the best.
It's not even close. But I wanna ask, you know, kind of wrapping this up. I'm sure we could talk to you about this for hours because it's absolutely fascinating, and I'm sure you could talk about it for several hours because it's honestly it's extremely interesting to hear your perspective as a teacher, especially since you have been doing it for so long. But what is one of your let's end this on a positive note. What is one of your favorite memories from teaching? What is it that really, like, when you think about this memory, it's like, okay, this is what keeps me going. This is what motivates me. I know you already said the artwork and the letters and things that you have from your kids, but like, is there anything that stands out in your mind?
Oh gosh, to be honest, I feel like there are so many different moments that are small but very meaningful to me. And I think the one that sticks out the most, because it was one of my most terrifying moments as a teacher, is when I was teaching middle school. So the first year that I taught I taught at a small charter school. And the first year I taught both 7th and 8th grade. And I was just like a core subject teacher, but we had a lot of problems keeping another teacher. So for the second year, I kept my 8th grader. It was like a self-contained 8th grade class. And we were really small. It was like 15 of us. And the kids when we started together, they were really not into school. They were kind of like, they didn't really want to get along with each other. And it was a process to build the sense of community that we needed in the classroom. Yeah. But I knew that we had succeeded when one of our students he was new that year. So he, and all the rest of the kids had been there the previous year. So they were already kind of bonded. And then this new kid came. And they accepted him pretty quickly. Like, he was a very sweet kid. He got along well, but he was epileptic. And one day during a math test, he had a seizure. And I luckily recognized what was happening like pretty quickly. And so I was able to, before things got like too out of hand, when it was just like starting, I was able to get one of the students to go to the office, and, I was able to have all of the students like, okay, everyone, like, I'm going to have everybody, like, we have a small medical emergency, like, everybody's going to go outside. The second graders are at lunch recess right now. Like, you're going to go play with our little reading buddies. Like, we just, like, Dylan and I need to take a second or whatever. And we were able to call the paramedics, and everything was worked out fine. But his mom had told me before he came to the school that, the reason he left his previous school is because he had been bullied about his epilepsy. Aww. And so I was really worried then, because he had this seizure at school, that he was going to be very embarrassed. Yeah. And so after the paramedics had taken him away and I went to go check on the rest of my class, they were all sitting together. Some of them had been playing, and they all came over. And they were so concerned for him. And they were just like, is he okay? Like, what can we do? And we spent like the rest of the afternoon like making all of these cards for him, and like making a little banner. And so they were like, we need to make sure that he feels welcome and like he's not embarrassed, and like we can't wait for him to come back. Is he gonna come back tomorrow? And so they like planned this whole little like, welcome back, Dylan. And it was just, I'm like getting choked up thinking about it, because it was just a moment where I thought like, wow, like, look at what beautiful humans these guys are. Yeah. Like, they just care so much about each other, and they have like completely put aside this idea of like needing to be cool. And 13 is a terrible age for everyone. Yes. And so like it's awful. It's awful. Yeah. And so seeing that level of compassion for one of their fellow classmates who they actually didn't really know that well, it was beautiful. And I was just like, oh, wow, like, we really have come so far. And that was one of my teaching highlights for sure. A low light and a highlight at the same time.
It definitely goes to show that humans are born good. That is what I believe. Yes. Children are born good. Yeah. And they're some of the most incredible people on this planet, and that's why we should be doing more for them. And fortunately, there are a lot of teachers out there like you, thankfully, who are doing their best, but we can, as a society, as the lay people, we can do better to help you and those like you, so you don't get burnt out.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, and Angélica, we don't want to take up any more of your time, but thank you so much for kind of coming on and spotlighting the teaching profession. It's very important. And we could probably, like Megan said, talk about this for hours, because, it's just one of those subjects that's got a lot of little facets. But, thanks for coming on and joining us. And it was good to talk to you about your profession this time around, rather than your obsessions with K-pop. It's nice to get to know all those areas of a person. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for putting the spotlight on educators. I think especially right now it's so important. That's kind of been my one major hope and possible silver lining of the pandemic is that most people would learn how challenging it is to be a teacher and maybe gain a little bit more of an appreciation for what we have to do.
I think there's a lot of people are a lot more sympathetic to teachers these days.
I should hope so.
I hope so.
I should hope so. Definitely. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode. I hope you found it interesting. Stay tuned next week, and we'll have a whole other topic of discussion for you. See you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Do you have a story to tell? We want to hear it. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast and share your story, contact us on our website at PaynePoints.com or any of the social media linked on our website. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on either Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. We'd appreciate a review, a like, or a comment to let us know what you think. You can find all of our podcasts linked on our website under the podcast tab. Once again, thanks for joining us, and we want to wish everybody a wonderful day.